Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In Surah An-Nisa, verse 19, Allah says, O you who have believed, it is not lawful for you to inherit women by compulsion, and do not make difficulties for them in order to take back part of what you gave them, unless they commit a clear immorality, and live with them in kindness. For if you dislike them, perhaps you dislike a thing, and Allah makes therein much good. Now, after having addressed the need to safeguard the honor, the character, and the reputation of a woman by making sure 4 witnesses are required if any blame is to be placed on a woman for having committed zina, the next problem that needed to be addressed was the issue of inheriting women. So 1400 years ago in pre-Islamic Arabia, it was common for women to be inherited. For example, if a man dies, leaving behind 2 widows, then it was permissible at the time of Jahiliyyah for his son from one of the wives to inherit the other wife. So basically, the other wife becomes the property of the son, and he can use her or dispose her as he pleases. She was not permitted to go back to her family, and she was not permitted to marry someone else. But of course, such grave injustices to women were not just prevalent in the past. Even today, many conservative Hindus believe that widows are not permitted to remarry. Since they cannot return to their parents as they are rejected by family, they end up shifting to NGOs. These are NGOs made by the government with the intention of looking after these women who will continue staying there until their death. So the advent of Islam ensured that women were permitted to marry elsewhere if they become widows, and no one had the right to inherit or own them. They did have guardians, but having a guardian doesn't mean ownership of the woman. The guardian does not become the woman's master. This concept is repeatedly explained in the Quran that women are not commodities or assets. They are humans. They have similar rights to men. Unfortunately, the concept of inheriting women can also be found in Pakistan, but just in a different form. For example, in rural areas, specifically, girls are reserved by someone else in the family for marriage when they are born. So basically, it is decided at birth who the girl will marry when she grows up. This is actually a form of inheritance. It is as if the girl has been inherited or owned by the interested party at birth. And now when she gets older, she has to marry into the family that has reserved her. This is not only a clear violation of this verse, where Allah has strictly prohibited girls from being inherited, but at the same time, it is a violation of the woman's rights. She has the right to say yes or no to a marriage proposal. She cannot be forced into a marriage. Now, at the same time, by ending this concept of inheritance and allowing women to remarry after divorce or the death of a husband, Islam was redefining the concept of marriage. Marriage is just a milestone in life. It is not your identity. It is not your purpose of life, implying that a marriage can be continued or it can be terminated, and a woman can marry someone else. The marriage does not define her in any way. So for some reason, if a marriage were to end, it doesn't mean that the woman has to be shamed. It doesn't mean that the woman was unsuccessful or that the man was a failure. It doesn't actually mean anything. It just means that it was a marriage that unfortunately could not continue, and both decided to separate their ways. Now, in addition, given that women were allowed to end a marriage through khula by returning a portion of their haq meher, men were being warned to not make life difficult for the women in order to encourage them for khula as opposed to divorce. Now, this was yet again a common problem then, and it even exists now. When a man wants a marriage to end, he refrains from divorcing his wife because then he cannot take back any portion of the haq meher. He cannot take back any gifts that he might have given to his wife. However, if she applies for a khula, she will have to return a portion of the haq meher to her husband. Therefore, khula could be financially beneficial to the husband instead of divorcing his wife. And of course, due to greed, men at times would decide to torture their wives to the extent that they were compelled to opt for khula. And Allah strictly warns them to abstain from such behavior and to treat their wives with kindness. In fact, many other verses in the Quran deal with the matter of talaq and make it evident that men cannot mistreat their wives even during a divorce. Therefore, reiterated in this verse, the gifts given to the wife by the husband, in addition to the haq meher, are for her to own. They cannot be taken back from the wife unless she has openly been found guilty of committing zina. In that case, she has violated the terms of her nikah contract, in which she promised to guard her chastity and her honor, and it's because of that violation that the husband then is permitted to take back some of his gifts. But other than that, which of course is a very extreme case, the husband cannot take back anything. Those gifts and the haq meher are her property. Finally, the verse ends with an extremely important piece of advice to all married couples. If you dislike your spouse, it might be that you dislike a thing and Allah intends to put much good in it. The idea being, do not act in haste. Do not focus only on the problematic areas or areas of difference between you and your spouse. Learn to focus on the good things too. You have to weigh both the positives and the negatives of a relationship when deciding if you wish to continue or end it. And also understand that every positive or negative will not be given the same weight. For example, if you have a wife that cooks well, that is a positive for you. But a greater positive is a wife that is loyal and guards her honor in the husband's absence. Both things are positive, but they cannot be given the same weight because one is far more superior than the other. A man can survive with a wife who isn't a good cook, but he cannot survive living with a wife who he knows cheats behind his back. Therefore, every person should be weighed in terms of their positives and negatives, with the understanding that every positive and every negative will not be given the same weightage. This is how a person can make a fair judgment as to whether or not the relationship should continue or end. In addition, there are characteristics that we want to see in our spouse, and there are characteristics that Allah advises us to see in our spouse. If we have a spouse who has the right characteristics in terms of what Allah advises, such as being righteous, pious, respectful, honorable, but not the characteristics that we wanted, such as incredibly beautiful, fair-skinned, well-spoken, modern, or wealthy, then be patient. It might be that you dislike your spouse, but Allah intends to put much good in that relationship. Why? Because if your spouse is righteous, pious, and respectful, Allah can put a lot of barakah in everything that he or she does. And that barakah will naturally affect you and your family as well. On the contrary, the person that has your desired characteristics but is missing in terms of being pious and righteous might give you happiness in the short term, but your relationship might be devoid of barakah in the long run. So instead of bickering on petty issues, always learn to focus on the bigger picture. If your partner has the desired characteristics that Allah loves, then there could be many blessings for you in the marriage in the long run. Blessings that you will feel through your wealth, health, and children. And this also helps to redefine the concept of love. Love is not about romance or feeling attracted to your partner at all times. Love is about sacrifice and compromise. Attraction is an emotion that comes and goes. That is why we have the example of a man who was thinking of divorcing his wife, and when he was questioned by the Caliph of the Islamic Empire, who was Hazrat Umar Raziyallahu anhu at that time, about why he was divorcing his wife, he said that he did not love her anymore. To that, Hazrat Umar replied, "Must every house be built on love? What about loyalty? What about appreciation? A woman gives birth to children and goes through hard times in pregnancy. She breastfeeds the baby and takes care of it all night, especially when the baby gets sick or needs anything. She sacrifices her beauty and youth to be a mother. How fair is it if her husband leaves her when she's grown up, when she's older? If she had never taken care of her home and family and instead focused on her body and beauty, her husband would say what a bad mother she is." Now you can see what an amazing piece of advice Hazrat Umar gave this man, even though, if you think about it, he has the right to give divorce. It is a right that Allah has given him. He's not violating anything. But at the same time, Allah makes it clear that divorce should be the last and final resort. Why are you divorcing your wife? Is it something serious? Is it something that deserves this relationship to be broken? Or is it something that actually is very irrational, very illogical, something that is based on short-term emotion like attraction and love? Basically, the idea that Hazrat Umar was explaining is that sometimes we are just never satisfied no matter what we have. We aspire to have what others have while forgetting that what we have might actually be better if you just change your perspective. Never make a decision regarding your marriage based on short-term emotions, because emotions are short-term. Today you might be feeling angry, tomorrow you might not. Today you might not be feeling love, tomorrow you might start feeling that. But sacrifices, compromises, these are long-term. And that is what has to be seen in the other partners to understand if this marriage is something that should continue or perhaps it should end. Assalamu alaikum.